Let me read to you a passage from the 12th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 1 to 12. It's the Gospel for Monday of the 9th week of Ordinary Time. St. Mark writes, Jesus began to speak to the chief priests, the scribes and the elders in parables. A man planted a vineyard, put a hedge round it, dug a winepress, and built a tower. Then he leased it to tenant farmers and left on a journey. At the proper time he sent a servant to the tenants to obtain from them some of the produce of the vineyard. But they seized him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent another servant, and that one they beat over the head and treated shamefully. He sent yet another whom they killed. So too many others. Some they beat, others they killed. He had one other to send, a beloved son. He sent him to them last of all, thinking, they will respect my son. But those tenants said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they seized him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. That's part of the passage from the 12th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 1 to 12. And what does it suggest to us? Well, one of the most striking and obvious features of all human life is the fact of work. Every man across the face of the earth is called to work, if only because his failure to work will result in his deprivation. He has to work to survive. But of course, work has a much wider and deeper meaning than this. Indeed, man's call and need to work is reflected throughout the visible creation. The animal and insect kingdom is ever active in its effort to survive and flourish, and this in turn is reflected in the domain of non-sentient living things that also struggle and act in order to survive. The tree in the valley reaches up and up in order to gain access to the sun and the elements. All of this is a powerful reflection of what man, who is at the apex of visible creation and who may be described as its Lord, is engaged in. Man works, and the rest of visible creation reflects this, and in its own instinctive and unchosen measure shares in it. Just how one would define human work as such is a further matter that could be the subject of endless discussion. But I suppose it could be roughly described as the application of one's energies to the fulfillment of a responsibility that is chosen or imposed. Whatever about all this, the obvious law of life and creation binding us to work in order at least to survive clearly manifests the will of the Creator. It is an all-pervasive pointer to the plan of God for mankind. God means us to work, and we know this because He has made it necessary for life itself, and this is clear to all, of whatever religion or none. Well now, that God has given us work to do is abundantly obvious also from the Gospels. Among other things, God is shown as an employer who has entrusted us with important jobs, and He will expect from us due results. At various points, Christ speaks of the work we have been given to do. This great point is clear in today's Gospel. in which our Lord speaks of the owner of the vineyard entrusting it to tenants to obtain from it its produce. Of course, the immediate context was our Lord's conflict with the religious leaders of the people and their persevering hostility against him. They were like tenants who were resenting and injuring the servants sent by the owner to collect the produce. Not only did our Lord have them in mind, but also their predecessors in the history of God's people. His servants, the prophets, were sent, and time and again they were repulsed and even put to death. And now God, in Jesus, had sent his Son. And what would the tenants do? Our Lord said he had one other to send, a beloved Son. He sent him to them last of all, thinking, they will respect my Son. But those tenants said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they seized him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. The point here, though, is that each of us must take to heart the warning our Lord directs against those who do not fulfill their appointed charge given to them by God. All this means that at the very center of our religious and Christian life is our commitment to our work. Work is not just a law of life and of success in society. That we work well is a divine law, a requirement if we are to be pleasing to God. It is essential for growth in Christian sanctity and for transformation into the likeness of Christ. Consider any of the saints and notice how industrious they were in their work in life. They saw their work as coming to them from God, as a sacred trust. They were like the tenants of our gospel passage today who were entrusted with the vineyard. They knew they had to care for the vineyard out of love for the master, and care for it well, such that the produce would come. Every Christian has a work to do in life. There is no day of his life when he does not have his work for God to do. St. Bernadette Soubirous lived a short life, and as she entered what would be her last illness, she said of it that it was her last job she had to do. She sanctified her illness and made of it a great work for God. Every day we ought rise with the intention of serving God as perfectly as we can in the work which he has given us to do by vocation or providence, in all its detail. By sanctifying our work, we sanctify ourselves, we sanctify others, and we contribute to the sanctification of the world.